Hi guys, I've been Cedric and welcome back to another video, and today we are going to be looking at the fourth Doctor serial, The Revenge of the Cybermen. So, let's get into it. So, The Revenge of the Cybermen is the first Cyberman story since the invasion all the way back in 1969. As John Pertwee didn't have a Cyberman story, and it's not then after this the Cyberman wasn't seen again until the early beginning of Peter Davison's era in 1982. So this one has quite a very odd position because it's been a number of years before. It's been a number of years since the Cybermen have appeared, and then after it'll be a number of years until they reappear. So this one's quite a unusual story in that sense. And I think maybe an issue with it is the fact that maybe for some people it isn't as good, which is why they didn't bring Cybermen back. So yeah, let's have a look. First of all, you have the new concept of the Cyber Wars. Now, the Cyber Wars are introduced in this, and then obviously they appear again a couple of times in the show, and most recently in The Timeless Children, where we see like the aftermath of the human versus Cyberman wars. But in this, it says how they were defeated in the Cyberman wars by the planet of gold, which is Voga, and this also introduces the concept of them like not having a weakness to gold, obviously, which, good on them, they did keep going. Like, they kept this going with Earthshock, where the Doctor kills one of them with Adric's Golden Star, and there is a mention, and then I think in Attack of the Cybermen, a couple of them died to some gold dust, and in Silver Nemesis, they died to the golden arrows and all that. So they do keep that trend going, but as in the 60s so far, we haven't known any of the Cybermen to show this weakness before. It was kind of an odd thing at the time that they'd introduced this, and then obviously they hadn't brought this back up because the Cybermen hadn't reappeared. They hadn't been in it for like a little while, I suppose. But it leads us to this Voga and this planet of gold, and I don't really like the Voga part of the storyline. It is a bit confusing, a bit all over the place. Obviously, Kevin Stoney returns to play to play a part as one of the Vogans, who are the natives of the planet, and it's the last time he appears in Doctor Who, after appearing 2 other times in the 60s. And I think this is his weakest performance out of the 3, mainly because I think in the first time he was playing this quite arrogant fanatic who wanted to work with the Daleks in the Daleks Master Plan. Then in the invasion, he was playing, rather than being a fanatic, he was and arrogant. He was being more of a manipulative player, but he was still a bit naive to think that Simon wouldn't double cross him. But he was more manipulative and calm and collected. But then in this, because he's not a villain and he's more of a good guy in this, maybe his strengths weren't there, and it's kind of just, it's not as good as you think it would be. Next you have the Doctor, and now Tom Baker has been on fine form throughout this season. Yeah, I mean, Robot, great. Ark in Space has been great. Even Sontaran Experiment, great. And then obviously Genesis of the Daleks, he's just really good in that. But then in Revenge, he does something which he does a couple of times with reoccurring villains, where he doesn't make them a threat. I think there's a thing with the Doctor where if the Doctor can sense the threat of the situation or the threat of the enemy, then the viewers will also be like, oh my gosh. I mean, in Genesis of the Daleks is a perfect idea. The Doctor goes back in time to the creation of the Daleks, and when he actually meets the first Dalek ever created, he's genuinely scared of it. and while watching it, and I'm sure at the time of people first seeing it, people were also like, oh, he's scared of these Daleks, we should be scared. But in Revenge of the Cybermen, because some viewers hadn't seen it, it was a bit odd that they took the approach of the Doctor basically telling them that they're nothing and they're not very good, they haven't got a home planet and they're a bit worthless. Because him downplaying them and saying they're not that as good as it kind of ruined what I assume would have been quite a chilling atmosphere from them in the past, where they have killed many people, and you know, and in some respects sometimes succeeded in their missions. And it was odd that they decided to go, well, in this story we're gonna make them downplayed by Tom Baker. And this is one of the few times where I think he's just not playing to his best ability. Obviously, there's a couple of episodes where you could argue that, but I think this is one of the big ones where he's playing the Doctor like well, but he's not playing the Doctor as I think he maybe could do. Because I mean, even some of the Doctors like Pertwee and Hartnell and stuff, Hartnell was arrogant, but Hartnell was very arrogant in some of his choices, but he knew when the threat was there, and you could tell that he knew about the threat. Whether it's just odd to see the Doctor try and offload it and be like, oh, they're not very that powerful. So, yeah, it's an odd one. But in terms of the other regulars, Harry, Sullivan, and Sarah Jane Smith are both very good in this. They are, they're not my favourite companion pairing. I'm not as big of a fan of Sarah Jane as some people are. But where credit's due, she is quite good in it. Then lastly we get on to what I think is the biggest plot hole of this, is the fact the Doctor, at one point, there's a couple of survivors, and the survivors and the Doctor have to get a bomb on the back, and then they get transported to the bottom of the planet, and they have to try and walk to the middle of the planet, and then they get blown up basically, and the whole planet just blows up. However, then the cyber leader, who is actually a decent design, I do like the cyber leader's design in this, he then says, well, you two cybermen, there's four of us, you two cybermen go down with them or behind them and stuff, and those two cybermen, sweep away the Vogons, which, you know, sounds fine. They're like, well, then at least brings them back a bit of a threat. But the issue becomes is, first of all, the whole premise of the story is that they're trying to not get in contact with this planet because they can try and restart the cyborgs with the end of this planet and the goal being gone. But surely if the Vogons even thought of a threat, or even, like, you know, had the idea that the Cybermen may return, would go, well, right, we need to make sure we've got a substantial amount of gold in our world, let's, you know, use that to our advantage. But they don't. Their guns aren't made of gold, or not made of gold, but their guns aren't shooting gold bullets, and it's odd, because it's just like, well, you've got this abundance of gold, you might as well use it to your advantage rather than using other weapons. And honestly, it doesn't... It's one of those ones where he's like, well, you know, it's not... It doesn't work, like, you know, it just doesn't really... Yeah, it just doesn't grasp you as a reader, as a realistic, because it's like... It's like some people say, as like a viewer, that you're like, well, you know... it's like, well... You know, you look into these things and you go, well, you shouldn't really, if you don't look into it too deep, you won't notice these cracks. But in this, I think this is one of those times where, rather than not looking too deep into it, like, I watched this with my younger brother, and he doesn't really know much about Doctor Who, and then he still managed to point this out to me. And I think when someone who just watches the show just to watch it, he points something out which is a flaw, you notice that it's not too good. But yeah, that's just been my look at it. If you have enjoyed this, like and subscribe. And yeah, I'll see you.